or you can put them in the chat. So go ahead, Bob, and thank you for coming today.
Thanks for having me. First, I want to thank Sheila Maybanks for collaborating with me this past week and going through her memory banks and helping me jog my memory on the various things that we've done over the years. Some things green team oriented, some things just out of project orientation. But I would say over the multiple years, we've done multiple things that were about practicing sustainability and good stewardship. But none of those would have happened without the groups like the Green Team and Sheila and our facilities maintenance team, who we, playfully call the Tuesday guys, even though I believe they've figured out that they work on more than just Tuesdays now. And that's the likes of Dan Wilson and Tim Edmond, Ron Hagan, and Chuck Newman. I could go on and on. And then also our outdoor landscape team and many of the things that are green and plantable. Sandy Went and her crew are also continually doing something to make our space look better and be more friendly. So a lot of these projects began with a need of one sort or another. And to use that old adage, necessity being the mother of invention, Trinity has had needs from which the care of creation and solutions were oftentimes born. So I'm going to walk through some projects that we've done, and it kind of ended up somewhat in two categories. Some of them are energy saving projects, although certainly good for the environment, and others are more environmental, purely environmental in nature. So the first one that came to mind is it was a large project, and it was when we converted all of the lighting in our building and worship center to LED. And that was done back in 2018. And it started out with years of struggle with poor lighting in the worship center. And it plagued us in terms of people being able to see the hymnals, sometimes it was just about bad enough. I'm not sure they were able to see each other, but certainly it affected us the more that we did in trying to put things online and to video record and so forth. So we were looking for a cost-effective solution to address that lighting. And out there are lots of lighting engineers, but you can spend tens of thousands of dollars on just a design and you're nowhere near getting any lights yet. So entered into the picture a gentleman by the name of Jim Lawfrey and his company called Logica Lighting Controls. And they do or have done numerous churches who had lighting troubles such as Trinity's, and they use wireless controls and innovative use of LEDs to improve lighting. Along with Jim came along our plethora of 3M retired electrical engineers and the Tuesday guys, and what resulted was not just attacking the lighting in the worship center, but changing the lighting in the entire building. So what we found and learned through Jim Lawfrey was that you could get a grant from Eiselt Energy, of which we did. And so the original cost to convert all of the lighting in the whole building to LED was about $67,000. Well, we got a grant from Eiselt Energy for about $17,000, giving us a net cost of $50,000, which we got approval for and took out a lighting loan over a 3-year time period with the bank, because the estimated payback on the project is actually 3.2 years. Now, that's an estimated or calculated savings. And it's an interesting process they go through to do that, and that we literally went through and counted every bulb in every closet and every under cabinet workspace and every exit sign, and calculated, so how many hours a day are the lights on in the hallway? And how many hours a day are the lights on in the worship center and the office and the classrooms and the bathrooms and so forth and so on? Now, the trick there, of course, is that's calculated. We don't have a separate meter on every light in every room. And so we're estimating what the usage is. The reality, now after 2.5 years, it looks like we are saving about $10,000 a year in electrical cost, which calculates out to about a 5-year payback. But in addition to that payback, which a little longer than we expected, but still great savings, we have a vastly improved lighting in the worship center and the entire building. And from an pure energy saving perspective and its effect on the environment, we are saving roughly or using roughly 800,000 kilowatt hours per month less than before we converted those lights. So I would call that a success. And we've had if Dan Wilson could sit up and laugh at this one, we've had more, shall we say, challenges in the worship center than we probably would like to admit to the entire congregation, but we keep finding fixes and it's getting better. No conversion is ever perfect, and we learned some things along the way, but overall, it's been a success. Also in 2018, in terms of energy savings, we converted all of the thermostats in the building, and there are 16 in all, to programmable electronic thermostats, which gives us the ability to turn rooms down at night automatically, and as well as set temperature down or up, depending on the season, during off-use daytime hours. The challenge has been, I guess probably not unlike our homes, except it's a much bigger building with a lot more spaces, is trying to figure out the variability of space usage and remember that, okay, we're going to use the living room, let's say, for a Bible study at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. And so we want that cooler or warmer ahead of time. And the worship center being probably the biggest challenge in that, because that room, especially in the summertime, does not cool down once it warms up in there. It does not cool down in just an hour or two. You have to be, you have to estimate when that's going to be used again and make that change. So with all those variabilities, it's difficult to measure what really the actual savings was that we generated, but I guess it's just one of those kind of common sense changes that we made that is certainly paying off, in that at least in the overnight hours, our spaces are thermostatically controlled at a temperature less than just leaving heated or cooled all the season long. So you may also notice that we converted all of our outdoor parking and terrace lighting to LED, and also installed light sensing photocells on all of that lighting, which provides not only safer, more well-lit parking and entrance areas, but also much more energy efficient. Now, some of that savings, of course, would be in that project that I alluded to before, but that was a change, another one of those areas that we were struggling with when daylight savings time would happen, and then the lights aren't set for the right time, and so forth. So that's also another project we completed. What you don't see, because you're not in this building very often, is that the Croy Center that Trinity owns across the 4th Street parking lot we just recently converted all of the common area lighting in that building to LED as well, which will reduce our costs and our use, because since we own that building, we do pay for the electrical bill that relates to just the common area in the back of that building. So now let's switch to some projects that are more, I would call, more related to environment, although certainly energy savings isn't related to environmental stewardship. So one of the older stewardship projects that Trinity worked on was, if you recall, when we did the renovation of the Croy Center back in 2012, prior to the post office relocating to that building. That was a project that was actually a $700,000 project, and it included a much needed repaving of the parking lot. But as we were looking at that project and trying to find the most cost efficient way to do that, and a part of that project, and this relates to the environmental piece of it, is that the Croy Center before the conversion did not have a loading dock on the north side of the building. And it also was where almost 90% of the rainwater from the rooftop of that building was draining. And unfortunately, the way the hill is sloped there, it would come off the north side of the building and then flow all the way across the parking lot down to the drain in the southeast corner. Well, if we got either snow melt in early spring or a rainstorm and followed by cold weather, there was a literal ice flow right across the main pedestrian walkway towards that building. And we had multiple issues with people falling, and it was hard, you know, it was not a good situation. Adding a loading dock to that side of the building was going to compound that problem. So as they were looking for solutions, along came Washington Conservation District with an offer of a grant if we would consider putting in a pervious asphalt surface and a rain garden to control the runoff from the building and the parking surface. Their concern was that all of that water was going directly into the storm sewer and directly into the St. Croix River. And of course, our concern was trying to improve that parking area because it was long overdue for needing to be repaved, and see if we couldn't address the water situation as well. So pervious asphalt at that time was a fairly new innovation, and it hadn't been put in many places. So we were a little concerned about, so what's the track record? But we decided to go ahead, given that the Washington County would pay 75% of the cost of that paving, or about $73,000. So what you can't see as a result of that is the engineering design that was put into place. All of the rainwater from the rooftop of that building now goes underground right where the loading dock is, and it drains into that big rain garden where the post office mailboxes sit. So that is a rain garden that is fed by literally the rooftop of the Croy Center. We were also amazed that even though that hill, that parking lot is fairly sloped, once they put in that pervious paving, that water, it would hit that pervious asphalt, and within about 10 feet, it more or less just disappeared. And now after 9 years, it's still pretty effective. Over time, a little bit of sand is built up in some of it, so it might drain a little bit further before it actually goes away. But it's been highly effective, and Washington Conservation District was very pleased with the way it worked as well. As part of that project, we also hired the Youth Conservation Corps of Minnesota, which I had never heard of until they came along, and they helped us, along with donations of trees and so forth from Vic Thalacker. They literally went out to Vic Thalacker's place, dug up trees and bushes, hauled them in, and planted them in that new rain garden at a much less cost than had we had to go to a nursery or go to somewhere commercial. So that project, a very large project, a very visible project, but is one that at least Washington Conservation District is very high on, feels great about the fact that we are keeping a lot of runoff water from going directly to the St. Croix. So in 2019, we tackled another project, and this was at the coaching insistence of our own Sheila Maybanks, of considering converting some of our trash and recycling to compostable and organics in our building. We did some research, found that an organization called BizCycle through the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce also was willing to offer a grant if we would convert our existing recycling and retool the bins and so forth to include organics, and also change over many of our supplies to compostable organics as well. And by doing that, not only did we reduce our trash, what we send to the trash every week that went to the landfill, but it also then lowers our cost of trash hauling, which is taxed. And some of that was instead shifted to a hauler that just collects compostable organics, and that is not taxed in the state of Minnesota. So there's kind of a wash there in terms of having two haulers instead of one, but we reduced probably by as much as a third the amount of waste and trash that we were sending to the landfill. And that grant helped pay for all those bins and all the materials that you see us using. Eventually, of course, that we've used up now most of those compostable materials, and that's just built into our budget. And the challenging ongoing process is educating the users about what goes in what bin, and trying to remind people that no, that's compostable, no, that's not, and recyclable, etc. You know, a large portion of our organics compostable trash is actually probably from the preschool that is in our building, because all of the paper towels from the bathrooms that we all use, all of those are compostable, and that's organic. So that's why all the trash in the bathrooms are labeled organics. And they, of course, with little kids and use of bathrooms, etc., use a lot of paper towels every day. So in terms of some other environmental projects that we have done, a little smaller in scale, but still important and positive. If you remember, for a while, the green space on the south side of our building was pretty barren. So with the donation from Vic Thalacker of some trees, and the Tuesday guys in facilities management in digging holes and hauling dirt, we have, let's see, 5 and 11 trees now around the perimeter of that property that, as they mature, will certainly be not only nice to the eye, but will be environmentally friendly as well. We have done over time kind of the same thing in terms of installing and planting more trees and a rain garden out at the drive-in, and all of that was done with volunteer labor. Late last fall, we actually had a Boy Scout complete an Eagle project, and the next time you're past Trinity, you'll probably notice that we've got plantings of daylilies in multiple places throughout, both on the green space and over on the cornering of the parking lot. Again, not only pleasing to the eye, but friendly to the environment as well. So the green team, I know in my chats with Sheila, has done a number of things, some of them in conjunction with God's Work Our Hands, which is a synod program that happens annually. They've done storm drain stenciling, they've done buckthorn removal. There were a couple of ravine cleanup hikes that were held. So there were multiple projects of that nature that we can thank the green team for completing. So what's coming up next? So we are in the process of working on what is called a solar garden subscription in the name of Trinity. So Trinity was approached by a company called IPS Solar, which works with churches and other institutions in arrangements whereby a organization like Trinity becomes a subscriber in a community solar garden. And in exchange for those payments for your subscription in the solar garden, we receive credit on our electric bill from Xcel Energy. So through IPS Solar, we are about to be subscribers in a portion of 3 solar gardens in northern Minnesota. And in exchange for that, we will be receiving a credit of approximately $2,000 a year on our electric bills. And that is actually over a 25-year period. Now, 25 years is a long time. So we've had some lengthy conversations about making sure this was a good thing to do, but it seems it's certainly good for the environment. It's cleaner, it's providing clean energy and benefits to the environment in that way, and a small benefit to Trinity as well in terms of our energy cost savings. So if things go as planned, those should be in place, and we should start seeing those savings by late in the second or early third quarter of this year. And then you probably have heard a little conversation about pollinator gardens. And I know that that came up early as we were warming up to our meeting today. We have been working with the Washington Conservation District again, and they have a small grant available for us that will pay for at least the seed for a pollinator garden, which will be and actually 2 pollinator gardens are what is being considered. The first one would be a swath about 15 feet by 200 feet right along the sidewalk along Myrtle Street on the green space, and would encompass the crab trees that are planted along that walkway. The second one would be installed probably this fall on the hillside that's just to the west of our building, north of the 4th Street entrance. It's a space that, quite frankly, has been somewhat a bane of our custodians' outdoor lawn mowing for years. You may or may not know it, but when Tom mows that lawn, he has to put on soccer cleats so he doesn't slide down the hill. It's not the most ideal, you could even say it's not the most ideal safe condition for our custodians, but it is long overdue for some attention that we have looked for ideas for quite some time about how could we get away from having to mow that without it just going to weeds. So we are now considering turning that into a pollinator garden as well. So that is an overview of several both environment and energy saving projects that Trinity has entertained and tackled over the years. I'm open to questions.
Any questions, folks, on what's been done or what you'd like to see done next, maybe? Or John, go ahead.
Bob, you mentioned the solar panel and said that they were located up in northern Minnesota. Can you share any specifics about the location of those?
I know they're up near the Chisago area. I don't have an exact address. I'm sure we will be given the address at some point. The reason the reason that we are subscribing in 3 different solar gardens is that the legal arrangements, if you want to call it that, between Xcel Energy and the investors and the operators of the solar gardens is that no one organization can hold over a certain percentage of ownership in a given solar garden. And so and every subscriber, like Trinity is one, we have a certain maximum based on what our electrical usage is that dictates what our credit and what our solar subscription can amount to. And in our case, it is more than what one single garden could hold and still keep us our percentage of subscription under the limit per the law and the agreements. So we have 3 different gardens that we will subscribe to meet all those requirements.
Okay.
Oh, that makes sense.
Okay. I just know that up near North Branch, one of the largest solar setups was opened not too many years ago. And whether that was a connection at all, but if this other one is close to Chisago City, that makes sense.
There may be, I know that, like I said, there are 3 and they are in different locations. And when we get the actual locations, we will certainly share that.
Okay, good.
Once that happens, is there a potential for maybe having, you know, us having some kind of a field trip by the solar garden folks to provide information, go out, see what it looks like, maybe get people interested in, you know, maybe doing that on a personal level as well? I mean, I think that would be just an awesome way of kind of educating us on it and promoting it.
We can certainly look into that.
I mean, I'm thinking, you know, that there could be people that would like to know more, just, and that is, I know we personally go back and forth talking about, well, we have a south facing roof that's really big. And then it's, yeah, but wouldn't it be better to just subscribe? So, and then I guess that's a question. Did the church look at putting panels on Trinity? Because we've got an awfully big south facing roof.
I would say that's both yes and no. We did not go so far to incur the expense to do an engineering study on whether or not the building can support the weight of solar panels. We learned a little bit from our neighbors to the north. The Ascension Episcopal Church was, I believe, all set to move forward with installing solar panels on their south facing roof, which is probably larger than our south facing roof in a huge surface. When they found out that when they did an engineering study that their building would not support the weight.
Oh,
Now, that isn't prove or disprove that Trinity's would, but there's a cost there. The other side of it is what oftentimes makes a solar installation pay off financially is that there are energy tax credits that are available if you invest and install a solar array on your property. But because Trinity is a nonprofit, we don't pay taxes. So we don't have that advantage. Now, environmentally, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing to do, but financially, it makes it a steeper hill to climb in terms of what you would have to invest to do so. All that said, doesn't mean we couldn't look at it in the future, and that might be something we would consider. But at this time, this offer came to us, and this was a pretty much investment-free way of supporting both the environment and solar energy, and getting a small benefit to Trinity in terms of credit on our utility bill as well.
thank you.
I will certainly look into the field trip idea and see where these are. You know, maybe a couple different groups of, retired men's group loves to do those kinds of field trips. I know that there's been some, couples trips that have done that, etc. We will certainly take a look at what might be offered in the future that way once those solar gardens are operational.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you. Any other questions? Any burning desires of something you'd like Trinity's community to be a part of or work on? Eunice, you're muted.
Yeah. I'm wondering with the green space, if you have made some idea or done some thinking of how to utilize that for the community, or with a gazebo or something. I don't know.
Mhm.
Well, there's a couple of things that, I mean, there was a green space team back, they've probably been disbanded about 3 years now, but one of their initial projects was to put the sign out on the green space, so it identified Trinity in a better way.
Good.
Since then, they also did a lot of both long and short term thinking about what might we do with that space. The challenge that we face, which is true of much of our property, is that we try to keep it multi-use. So there would be some things that one might say, well, why don't we do this or that on that space, would preclude us from ever having, for instance, Trinity Fest and tents out there again. So we need to find ways to use that space that doesn't preclude another use from ever happening again.
Right.
One of the possibilities that is a strong possibility is in collaboration with LADC, the preschool that is in our building. We are looking at relocating the playground back to its old location, which was back on the 3rd Street side, kind of on the corner of on the southeast corner area of the building, which is the northeast corner of the green space, rather than where it is now, which is behind the post office across the parking lot. Not only not the most ideal place for a troop of little kids to be marching to, but it doesn't give us much of it would be a much more family friendly feel if the playground was a lot more visible right adjacent to our facility.
Yeah, that makes
So that
sense.
would be a use that could be in one small portion of that large green space without affecting our ability to do other things out there.
Yeah. Good.
So and the pollinator garden was another example of, we can put a swath of that down by the sidewalk. It's not going to affect our use of the space elsewhere, nor and yet it's still something different, something environmentally friendly to do.
Sounds good.
Good
Eunice,
question.
I was on that team, and I would have to see if I still have any of my notes from it, but there was a big list of ideas and dreams and whatnot. Some of the other stuff is how do we fund it?
Yeah.
You know, and is that the highest, is what we do there the highest priority of how we use our finances of the church? So, I mean, there were all sorts of things like having a labyrinth, putting up something that was a little bit, you know, like a more of a permanent staging, whatnot. So, you know, we could have like a little amphitheater. I mean, those were some ideas that came up, but of course they're, you know, quite costly. Some other things were like, you know, would we want to do something with community gardening? Or, you know, so a lot of ideas, you know, including the ideas of, do we do nothing, or do we put up a building structure for affordable living or senior housing? I mean, so it went the gamut as far as ideas. And then it was,
that was good. Yeah.
So
Pardon me, Penny.
Go ahead, Bob. I don't remember all of them.
One of the more, I wouldn't call it immediate, but one of the short-term things that we would like to do, but it does involve cost, is providing for a sidewalk and set of stairs right south of the building that would make the space more accessible from where most of our parking is. Right now, there's a tendency when there's an event out on the green space, people would just, well, you know, the shortest distance from between 2 points is a straight line. So they head right for it. But in between where they are and where they want to be is a hillside of riprap and large rock that's there to stop erosion and protect the parking lot. Well, that's the worst place for people to try and negotiate a walkway down over that rock. So that was something in that green space team was discussed, is could we figure out a way to make that safer and easier to get to?
Okay.
Easier said than done, because putting in concrete, constructing steps, etc., is both somewhat costly, and also there's some engineering to do with that. So that is one of those short-term fixes that we would still like to accommodate.
Good, good. Thank you.
Any other
Yeah,
questions? Yeah,
I
John.
have one. Yeah, we had a presentation, I don't know, month and a half ago about some homeless housing. It seemed like a good presentation and everything. That, is Trinity considering anything of that nature? We'd have like 4 units or 10 units for homeless housing.
That's probably a question for that.
I'm not even sure that's within the scope of what we're talking about today. But you mentioned something about that, Penny, about housing. And I guess that's sort of stewardship. But is that something that we're considering at all?
I think that's probably a question more for the missions team than it is for this group. I know at times there's been a conversation about a lot of ideas, everything from, warming shelter to, and homelessness is a large category of issue. But there's no immediate, drawn up plan that I'm aware of yet. So.
Okay. Thank you.
So, and also Trinity's involvement with the ideas of Cares for Creation can be beyond just what we do with the property that we own. So I don't know if Sheila, if you have, I know you said you had a cold today, but if there are things that maybe Trinity is looking at doing that would be more contributing to the valley greater than just our personal properties. Are you there, Sheila?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Because of COVID, our committee certainly has not been active at all. There is a lot of ideas for the future. I'm in contact with the people on the environmental committee at Ascension, and they're interested in working together. We're home to some very wonderful organizations, and I think we can perhaps find ways to partner, like with Bellwyn Conservancy, with Carpenter Nature Center, with the state parks, and also, so there's a lot of wonderful environmental groups around. Also, the St. Paul Synod has a person, I believe, who works with environmental and creation care. And that's certainly potential for partnerships there.
That's right. That's right. There is a Senate level organization.
Yeah, and then there's a national level too. I mean, there's Lutherans Caring for Creation. I think it'll be very interesting to see what happens next after the pandemic. Maybe I hope there'll be an outburst of creativity or new ways of looking at things and new awareness of how critical our natural world is. So.
Yeah, John Hodler.
Elsie said she hollered at me to get on and answer John Buechner's question about homelessness.
Okay.
There's a very active team, a subgroup of the missions team, exploring different options for homelessness and how Trinity and the Sanctuary Valley Interfaith community can be involved. The team has expanded to Ascension, Our Saviors, St. Mary and St. Michael's, and hopefully First Pres, etc. Some of those options that are being considered are: 1, would we simply build a tiny home to go into a sacred settlement at another location as a learning curve? 2, in conjunction with a lot of committees, people, what can the green space be longer term? Is that a potential? Should we support
Washington County initiatives that are underway on finding shelters for adults, etc. There's a lot of discovery work going on, and in the next couple of months, some of those options will be presented to the church council for consideration. And that's the best answer I can give you right now, John. Everything's on the board, soliciting suggestions, especially questions and concerns. One of the things about putting the tiny homes configuration on church property where it has to go is there are 2 bills in the Minnesota legislature, one called a House Bill 1474, another House Senate bill, which clean up some of the code, zoning code language about tiny settlement, tiny homes on church property. They've gone through a couple committees with unanimous bipartisan support, but have run into an issue with the League of Minnesota Cities, which has several questions about what their true objection is. What they're saying, it will not meet code, but there is some suspicion that they're afraid of lost tax revenue. But anyway, I don't know the real answer there, but that's one of the hangups right now about sacred settlements, and any tiny home configuration as the sacred settlement puts it together go on sacred settlement. So I've gone into more detail, Penny, than probably you wanted, but I thought, okay, my wife told me to answer the question. I will answer the question.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much. Thank
That
you.
was perfect. That was perfect. And I suspect that you're always willing to take on more people that want to become really actively involved in what you're doing, right?
I know who to talk to now.
You know who to talk to now, John.
That's
Yeah,
right.
you
Thank you.
connect with John Hodler. Yeah, there's a good team there. Any other questions today? Comments? Yes. Go ahead, Norma.
Yeah.
You're still muted.
Okay, just a comment about things that Trinity can do, and I always think of the younger ones, but in terms of education and learning for both adults, as you do, and kids. And in the library, with thanks to Sheila, we have a great number of, I'm just looked at something, we have like 20 books for young kids, and they're current books, things about thinking green and recycling and the adventure of an aluminum can, and books like if children love Judy Moody, there's one about saving the world, and for families, you can save the planet, 50 ways to make a difference. So we have a lot of good resources there to get out to young kids. And that always, if it involves young kids, it involves parents and information too. And the other thing is, as someone mentioned, the St. Paul Synod, we do have the ELCA statement on caring for creation, vision, hope, and justice. And we do have, there's a book Sheila recommended called The Bullhead Queen. It's an environment about environmental nonfiction book about Pioneer Lake in Minnesota. I think would be really interesting for some people to read. And the Paul Douglas book, I didn't recognize that because he was the second author on that book. So in the library, it's under Hess Cox, but I could change that if Paul Douglas would be more meaningful. So anyway, we have just really, I think, a multitude of good sources that I will try and get out to, maybe through Sarah for young kids, that she could get a family that would start circulating books through children's ministries. And then also I was just teasing about Nan and Bob too. He just had a minor surgery on Thursday. And so he's just laid back a little bit. Everything is good, but he's just tired.
Good.
yeah, it's all perfect. So anyway, thank you for this. Thank you.
Thank you. And speaking of education, Sheila, do you want to fill people in on the, we have our adult forum next week, but for anyone that has family with young children, isn't there something going on next week for them as well, Sheila? It's always hard to know if someone's still there. Let me see if I can find it.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I'm just was going to try to find it too on my Trinity today, but it's hopefully the weather will cooperate. And there will be some family friendly activities. There'll be a story told about a woman who saves water, a book that Sarah knew about. Let's see.
Oh, here it is. It's bring a blanket, join all families for a time of celebration. Pick up materials on the 18th to celebrate at home. You'll hear a story, pray for our earth, pick up a scavenger hunt and grass project to go home, treats, and hear more about the Trinity Pollinator Project. So if you know of people who have families, it would be a nice activity maybe for them. That I know sometimes when you have kids, but if you have, families with grandkids or whatnot, for them to have to find something for them to do so they can come to adult forum is difficult. This might be a good opportunity for them to kind of learn about things there. And that's going to be on the green space at 10:30 next week. Of course, you folks can come to adult forum at 11 still and hear about the Pollinator Project in the bee garden or the bee garden.
And I think the garden space on the green space, I think that's going to be marked off and there'll be some signage so people can see can visualize where it will be.
Right, there will be, Sheila.
Yeah.
And even though that project actually can't start until mid-May just because of the season and planting, but that it will be marked off with signs.
Yeah.
Well, also remember that next week we return to in-person worship for the first time in over a year at 8:30, but you must pre-register this week in order to attend, which is something entirely new for all of us, but it is necessary in order to do that in-person worship safely. So you can register online or you can register by calling the office, but you must pre-register in order to attend.
And that's at 8:30.
8:30.
Yeah. So also, I was going to say we're just about done here. Also, I am going to send out an email, but in May, after we have our green month here of April, in May, we are going to be doing a look at making sense of the cross. It's kind of like we're going to go back to, okay, we had Easter, the resurrection, but now what does it all mean? Type thing. And we're going to be following David Lose's study, Making Sense of the Cross. And so I wanted to give folks a head up. I will send the information out. Pastor Peter is going to order up some books if people want them. We're going to go through the 4 different atonement theories or whatever on that. But the church is going to buy some. I think they're going to run somewhere between $12 and $13 if people want to have it so they can read, the chapter before we watch the video and discuss them. We are going to have Pastor Chris and Pastor Peter lead some of those discussions as well. But I wanted to just let you know ahead of time. You can think about it if you're going to want one, and we'll get the information to you as far as how you can get one of the books, since we aren't necessarily at the church when we do the study, because we're going to still be Zooming, but it's really going to be a very interesting study. So I just wanted to give you that heads up, and I will send out an email as well. So I want to thank you, Bob, very much for filling us in. It sounds like Trinity's done a lot of work in this area, and we're glad to hear that. And we thank you for your time and information. And you as
You're
well,
welcome.
Sheila, for all the work you do with that green team. And we look forward to next week. Lori Schneider's a really fun person. She'll be really great to hear what their organization has been doing around the area, and also how that Trinity is being involved in that. And I just thank you so much again, as always, for joining us this Sunday morning. And get outside today and do something green, I guess, before the rain comes again.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
folks all so much. Have a great day.